Have you ever wondered why some people seem to repeat the same patterns they swore they'd never pass on to their kids? If you've ever caught yourself snapping when you're overwhelmed, struggling to be present, or wondering why certain situations trigger such a big reaction, you're not alone. Welcome back to the Higher Alignment Podcast. I'm Mintu Lam, Executive Burnout Coach, and I help high performers regulate their nervous systems so they can build success without sacrificing their health, relationships, or themselves. Today, I'm joined by a returning guest and fellow nervous system coach, Laura Larios, and we're diving into how childhood experiences shape our nervous system, why unresolved trauma quietly follows us into our careers, relationships, and parenting, and what it actually takes to break the cycle. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why your children borrow your nervous system and the simple shifts that you can use to help you become the calm, grounded presence they need. Let's dive in. Well, Laura, thank you so much for being on the podcast again. I was thinking about this yesterday. You are actually my number one repeat guest on this podcast. I think this is going to be your third time now. And for anyone who hasn't listened to Laura's previous episodes, please go back and do that. We've talked about the mother wound and how that shows up in high performers. We talked about the father wound, which actually is pretty on brand for where we're going today with this conversation. So, talking about, children and childhood trauma and parenting. But first, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me back. Yeah, it's an honor to be back on your show.
Well, and before we started recording, why I love Laura so much is I think nervous system work is having a moment right now. Hopefully it's a lasting moment, but it's definitely coming up in conversation more and more, which is great. But just like anything, you can tell when there's some people who kind of get it and some people who really get it, and no judgment. Like, people are at different levels of discovery, and the fact that we're having the conversation more is what's important. But I know with your work, there's so much depth to it and integrity behind it, and you really prioritize the nervous system from human first versus like whatever else people are trying to use it to get done, which we know it's the gateway to, creating your life. But I just appreciate that you always take a human first aspect. So yeah, I'm just really excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Okay, well, what spawned this was I was looking at your LinkedIn the other day, and I saw that you were talking to a school board about this work. And I think this is so important because, yes, nervous system work starts with us and learning how to work with ourselves and, how to understand our own system and how to work with it and working with us. But we also don't think about, if you do have children, how it impacts your kids. And I truly believe it's the most important thing you can do as a parent is learning how to regulate and how to work with this system so that it can support your children. But maybe let's start there. What got you into this work of talking to school boards? What's kind of led you in that direction and why you think it's such an important conversation right now?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity recently to speak with a room full of school board administrators, and this opportunity came actually at the beginning of this year. Someone saw me do a live on Substack. Actually, she was a school board administrator, and I was talking about the nervous system and speaking about the different aspects of how it impacts our ability to focus, our ability to be present, our ability to think critically. And so the conversation really landed with her. So she actually reached out to me, sent me an email saying, "Hey, would you be willing to come and do a 1-hour workshop or training, speaking to some of our early education teachers?" So these are individuals that are in preschool age, essentially. So these are very, very young children. And she was saying that they were experiencing a lot of burnout, essentially. They're very overwhelmed. Children with a lot of just different behavioral issues that they were really struggling to know what to do with and how to help their nervous systems remain calm when obviously the children were experiencing a lot of stress during the day. So I came in at the end of February of this year. I did a 90-minute virtual workshop with some of their early education teachers and kind of just started with, speaking to what is the nervous system and the different states of the nervous system and helping them just to understand more where their nervous system was going during the day? Like, where were they spending predominantly most of their time in? Like, what state of the system were they in most of the day? And many of them realize I'm in fight or flight. Like, I'm in this yellow, I call it the yellow zone, where it's like, everything feels very urgent. I'm feeling very overwhelmed. I'm snapping easily. I'm sure even if you're a parent right now and you're listening to this, you might even relate to that feeling of like losing your patience quickly, yelling, saying, giving instructions multiple times and feeling like they're not hearing you and you're just getting more and more frustrated. So that's basically what they were sharing with me. And then after that workshop, they said, this was so impactful. We got such great feedback. Would you come in and do an in-person one this time, like a half-day training with our early education teachers? And so that's what I did back in, I think it was April now of this year. I went in person and I actually taught more about, okay, what are some tools we can now use like in the moment when you are noticing you're in that yellow zone or some of that fight or flight, and also helping them to really understand what's going on with the child and their nervous system and how they're actually borrowing from our nervous system. And so the more we're regulated, the more we're going to notice shifts in behavior in the children. And so, then the opportunity just kept going. Essentially, they were like, okay, now I want you to talk to our administrators because we want this to be kind of rolled out into more of the education spaces here and get more funding for this, because they were just realizing like this was the missing piece, because they've had all these different trainings and like different strategies, like things to help with behavior. But no one really talked about what connects the behavior, though. Like, you can know all the things. You can know to be calm in the moment. Like, this is the technique that you need to do. But if your nervous system's dysregulated, it's not actually going to reach for that in the moment. Because again, you're not in your cognitive thinking, rational mind. You're in your survival brain and you're just reacting versus responding. So that's essentially like what I've been invited to do, is to come in and help them to, bring in that missing piece that they've had, because they have all these resources and tools, but they're not really using them in the moment because their nervous systems are dysregulated.
Okay, you said so much there that I have so many questions on, okay? And I hope we can get into some of those practical things, but what's so key about this is, our teachers are spending 8 hours a day with our kids, so it is so valuable that they have this information. But again, as parents, one thing I would love for you to expand on is, you said, the children are borrowing our nervous system. So can you maybe explain that a little bit, for what that means for people when children are borrowing our nervous system?
Absolutely. So, young children, they, when they come into the world, like their nervous systems are still developing. They're still being shaped and formed. So they don't have the ability yet to know how to self-regulate themselves. Like adults, we have more of that ability because we're older, we have cognitive reasoning, processing. And so as little kids, like essentially they're looking to our nervous system to be the mirror, to be the one to help them ground and stabilize when they're feeling overwhelmed with a lot of emotions and feelings, which a lot of young kids is what they're experiencing. They're going, as they're growing and their brains are developing, there's a lot of different emotions that they're experiencing in that. And so there's frustration and anger and sadness and joy and like all these different pieces of emotional experiences, but they don't have any rational cognitive understanding of what those emotions are. So then they're looking to us then to model like how to move through those different emotions in a way that feels safe. So they borrow from our system, like they mirror our nerve. We all mirror each other. So like, even if you're a leader right now in a leadership position, like the state of your system is a mirror to your team. So when you're walking into that team meeting, your team members are borrowing essentially a little bit of your system in that meeting, because their systems are looking to you as the example. This is why I love working with leaders, right? Because then there's that trickle down effect into the entire organization of like, hey, we're going to get your system more regulated, because then that's going to have a ripple effect into the team, because you're mirroring each other. And so it's the same with, even more so with small children, because they don't even have the ability to self-regulate. They're looking to the adult's nervous system or the primary caregiver that they're with to regulate through intense or difficult emotions.
Yeah. Okay. That's so, I'm so glad you laid that out, because a lot of the time I encounter this. I don't know if you do, because again, I'm working with, people who are in leadership positions who they're used to everyone depending on them. So they need to show up for everybody else, and they prioritize usually showing up for everybody else before themselves. So for instance, when I take on a client and they start doing this work, which is the nervous system work, there's definitely a period, a substantial
Mhm.
period of having a hard time of doing things for themselves, whether that's regulating in the moment or even showing up to, a booked session when a meeting comes up or something for somebody else comes up, they're quick to cancel. And
Yeah.
so, this period of them being able to show up for themselves, I think they have a hard time justifying that. But with what
Mhm.
you said is it's so important for them to do that because the people around them are borrowing whatever energy they're on. So
Yes.
while it feels selfish in the moment, it's actually very unselfish because it's what you're doing is you're making yourself better, more regulated, more grounded, more present, not only for yourself, but for the people you are committed to helping, right?
Exactly.
And you explained it in such a way that's not just oh, you should do it for you, kind of like in a self-love way. You explained it in
Right.
a way that's it's biological, it's physiological. Like this is
Yeah.
just how our bodies work, right? Um,
Exactly.
I wanted to, I kind of have two directions I want to go with this, but maybe we'll kind of start here and then pivot as to our lead our way into a journey as to why this work is so important. Um, I remember in the book, The Body Keeps Score, I'm sure you've probably read it. And if anyone hasn't, it's really brilliant. But the author, I can always mispronounce his name, Bessel van der Kolk, I
Yeah.
think, something
Yeah.
like that. Anyways, something that really stuck out to me in that book is he talked about how, um, everyone thinks that, diabetes or cancer is like the number one health crisis we have to worry about. But what he talks about is one of the most important health crises we actually have to worry about is childhood trauma. Because when someone has unresolved childhood trauma, it makes all those things, it makes us more susceptible to experiencing all those things, the cancer and all those, and diabetes, all that stuff. So maybe Laura, I'd love to pick your brain a little bit on how childhood trauma affects us moving forward. Like what part does that play in how we handle our children, how we show up at work, how we relate romantically or even in friendship? Like maybe just, I know you could probably talk for days on that, but just like a little bit of how that affects us and plays into all of that.
Yeah. So obviously I love this direction that you're going in. And I think you posted something, I remember, I think yesterday, or reposted a video yesterday that was so good. That was talking about this one leader who has spent like an incredible amount of money on trying to optimize his health to make him like basically live forever.
Yeah, Brian
And this
Johnson.
one, yes, yes,
And
that's his name. Thank you.
he spends $2 million a year on his
Yeah.
health. But yeah.
So yeah, 2 million. Like, so, and he has like access to like 30 doctors, like the latest technology, biohacking, like you name it. And like, I think even they gave him like a chronological biological age of like 18 or 19, but he's just been recently diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, which autoimmune conditions are essentially the body's attacking itself. And when the video essentially I think you reshared was like this talking about this piece of the childhood trauma, like the aspect of the one thing that he hasn't fully looked at or addressed as far as we know, but like the emotional piece. I think oftentimes we forget the emotional aspect of how that impacts us, our physiology and our health. I know definitely even the medical system at times has overlooked that piece of like how emotions impact our health. So in answer to your question, that the childhood trauma piece. So, well, first, I want to define trauma for just a moment, because sometimes when we hear the word trauma, probably for most of your audience is going to say like, well, that doesn't apply to me. I had parents that were very present, meaning they picked me up from soccer practice, they made me dinner. I was not abused. They were very loving towards me. So trauma is defined by not just what happened, but also what didn't happen. So most of the clients I work with, and I think similar to some of your clients as well, it's not about like this big, like physical, big T trauma, like the physical abuse or, living in extreme poverty, things that we would normally associate trauma with, but also when we say like what didn't happen. So we might have had a parent, for example, that was working a lot and because they had to, but when they came home, they just were not very present with us. Maybe we're excited to see them. We want to talk about our day, but they just were not like, okay, yeah, like I'll talk to you later. Like they're watching TV. They're not really making eye contact with you. They think, you think like they're saying they're listening, but there's no, body language indication that they're really hearing you or tuning with you. So that's a need we all have. It's an emotional need to be seen and heard, to feel chosen. And so when that need isn't met over and over and over again, like maybe once in a while it happens, but when it's repetitive, that leads to a core wounding within us where we start to believe we're not good enough. And when we start to carry a wound of, I'm not good enough because these emotional needs were not met, maybe the physical needs were met, yes. But again, there was some things that just were not, that didn't happen in our experience growing up. We then carry that wound into everything. Like basically, like most of the people I work with carry that wound then into the jobs that they get, like careers that they start to build. And even the types of, it's really interesting. We could probably go down a whole rabbit hole around this piece, but even the types of, managers that we end up attracting, like there's a mirror there of, usually there's like when we start to get really triggered by our boss or by a certain leader, it's usually triggering an emotional wound from our childhood. We don't think of it rationally that way. We look at the email or we look at like that team meeting we had or that one-on-one we just had with them, and we think it more from that logical place. But there's normally what I see is like there's like a big emotional response, and like the body, maybe feels a lot of heat. You feel like you want to like fight or you want to run away, or there's this feeling being frozen almost. And underneath it is like this feeling of I'm not good enough. That's what I see with a lot of the people I work with, is like, no matter what I do, they're not hearing me, they're not seeing me, I'm performing, I'm doing all these things, and all they're doing is telling me what I'm doing wrong. So it's like hitting on that core wound again and again and again. And these are people that are very healthy. They're eating well, doing breath work, they're running, like, you name it, like they're red light therapy. And yet they're emotionally speaking, because they haven't dealt with that childhood wound of I'm not enough. And it's getting consistently kind of mirrored back in their jobs is one example, one place where some of that wounding is mirrored back to them. It leads to a lot of chronic stress, and then we start to see a lot of physical symptoms manifest. And maybe isn't diagnosed as a quote unquote autoimmune issue, but we start to see symptoms that could eventually lead to something like an autoimmune disorder. And which actually there's actually 3 or 4 stages of autoimmune, so it's not like you have it and then suddenly you go to stage 4. There's subtle stages of it, but point being is that they're having health signs that doctors can't diagnose as an actual thing, but they're signs of the body in distress.
Man, I'm so glad you touched on that, Laura, of just like trauma not being what did happen, but what didn't happen. Because again, the majority of people that I work with, and even me, like I always say, like this not good enough wound that I've had that honestly kind of made me a high performer, because that's how I overcompensated for it, was from just like what you said. Like my dad worked 16 hours a day because he had to put food on the table and pay the mortgage. But a 5-year-old's not making reason of that, right? Like that's beyond my scope at that time. So then, yeah, there was just like, he's tired when he gets home, and and there's not that connection. And I think when you talk to a person, a high achieving person as an adult now, and you talk about this wound of like how you said, when you're not seen or heard, that's a lack of emotional connection. I think our brain goes to, well, what's the big deal? Like I shouldn't need that. I'm an adult. I should be able to function past that. Like, you know what I mean? Like we downplay it so much. But as you said, it's a biological need. So you can keep trying to pretend that you don't need it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's going to show up, as you say, either in like the type of relationships you attract, both professionally and personally,
Yes.
or again, in how your body responds. And I think it's just so important to highlight, like, you don't want attention and connection because you're a baby or because you're lonely. Like, baby from like a, how people like make sense. Like I'm just being like dramatic about it. You need it from a biological standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you touched on that. Okay, so now what I think you did so brilliantly is you not only painted the picture of people's childhoods, I think you also so brilliantly painted the picture of what a lot of high achievers are doing when they get home to their own children. Right. And just seeing how that plays out, of just like not having the attention and not having, the capacity at the end of the day to connect. So talk to me a little bit now about, like you actually said before we got on before we started recording, how these things kind of work in circles and how they're kind of in cycles. So now if someone's kind of having an epiphany of like, oh, like not only did I go through that as a kid, I'm kind of also doing that now. Like,
Mhm.
how would you help someone through that? Or like, what are things they could do to like not repeat the cycle, if you will? Okay, if you're an executive who's craving more clarity, happiness, and a sense of real inner peace in your day to day, make sure you hit follow so you never miss an episode. This show is here to help you lead, succeed, and actually feel good while doing it. And if something resonates today, give it a like and share it with someone else who could use a little bit more calm in their life too.
So your child's emotions don't just affect your child, they affect you. And this is where the conversation really starts to get really interesting because your child's nervous system is interacting, like I said, with yours all day long. And if you grew up in a home where anger wasn't welcome, I have a lot of clients that have through our work together has shown to reveal their nervous systems have revealed that anger was not a place they could go to. Like they would get punished or sent to their room or told to calm down right away if they got started to get frustrated or didn't want to eat something, or their nervous system was having a response, but the parent didn't know how to didn't know what was going on. Maybe didn't have the capacity for that emotion, so it was told you can't get angry, right? So you start to see your child getting angry or frustrated. That's going to trigger you because that was an emotion you weren't allowed to feel when you were younger. That was an emotion that led to maybe a feeling of feeling unsafe or feeling disconnected from your caregivers, which is also a very big survival need we have, to feel safe with our caregivers and feel connected to them. So if you grew up in a home where anger wasn't welcome, where you were told to stop crying, I see a lot of clients that same thing, crying was not something that was welcome in their home, or where disappointment made the adult uncomfortable. You were feeling disappointment and they went right to the positive right away, or where conflict, it felt unpredictable. Your child's emotions are going to activate something much older inside your body without realizing it. So you're not just responding to your 4-year-old. Part of your nervous system, it may be responding to the experiences from from your own childhood.
Mm.
And most parents don't even realize that that's what's happening. They simply think like, why am I getting so triggered? And it's because our nervous systems remember long before our minds do. And when I first started this work, I thought I was helping people feel calmer and manage stress, that's part of it. But over the years, I've realized that that's not actually the goal. What I'm really helping people do is expand their capacity for life, their capacity to stay connected during conflict, their capacity to stay present with their children when big emotions arise instead of immediately reacting, their capacity to hold disappointment, uncertainty, joy, and even success without moving into survival. And that realization changed everything for me. And so I don't think that most parents have, again, an information problem. I think they have a capacity problem. And most parents already know they should stay calm. I'm sure most of your listeners here, you're listening to podcasts like this, you're reading books, like you're someone that likes to research and know, like, what are the things I can do, right? So it's not that you don't know what to do. It's just that your nervous system may be in a state where when these big emotions, like your child might be expressing as one example, is showing up, your system is having, a response to something that's much older and much deeper. And so the challenge isn't knowing what to do. It's whether your nervous system has the capacity to access that wisdom in the middle of a screaming child or a long workday or very little sleep. And this is why I believe this work is so transformative, because it's not just about learning and about a parenting technique or learning about another parenting technique. It's really about expanding your capacity to be the parent you already want to be. And I also just want to say too, to your listeners, is that you're probably already doing also a much better job than you're giving yourself credit for. Just the fact that your children is expressing big emotion in front of you also is a really good indication that they actually feel safe with you. So if your
Mm.
child is expressing anger or frustration, or they're throwing something, or they're having an emotional response, I often will tell parents that's actually a good sign. If you had a child that was just totally complacent and quiet all the time and not expressing much emotion, that's more concerning, because that's a child that doesn't feel safe to express their emotions. They're shutting down.
Oh my gosh, Laura. So good. So brilliant what you just said. And we're going to pause that other question I had. We're going to get to it because I want to
Yes, we're definitely getting back to that.
Yeah, we won't forget it. We'll come back to it on like practical steps. But
Yeah.
oh my God, what you said is so key, is like that is a sign of safety in itself. And again, back to your point of like, it's not about what did happen. It's about what didn't happen. So even in that instance, if your child feels safe enough to have those big emotions around you, that's a good thing. If your child is like in freeze or terrified around you all the time, right? Because they're feeling that unsafe, then they're going to try and pretend and have everything perfect. Like that again is even more concerning. So I'm sure there's probably a lot of parents right now that just said, oh, like took a deep breath knowing you gave them that little bit of a blessing and some permission there. Because I'm not a parent myself yet. I have a niece and nephew that I consider like my daughter and son, but like I know how debilitating that can feel when your kid's having a meltdown and just nothing you can do is helping, right? So what I take away from what you just said is almost like just double downing on the fact that, okay, if they feel safe enough to have this response in front of me, I just need to keep creating a safe space for them to do that, right? And sometimes that just means letting them have their moment, right? And not rushing to fix it, because that's also hard for high achieving people. Like if you're problem solving all day long, your default is going to be for your own comfort, because like you said, probably most of us don't realize we weren't allowed to feel these things, is, well, how do I stop the crying now? How do I solve the problem now? And that could be with children. That could also be with your partner, right? Like when they're feeling something, you want to go solve their problems for them right away, where a lot of times what they're looking for is, back to what you said, just to be seen and heard. And sometimes solving the problem bypasses that. They just want to be seen and heard for what they're feeling in the moment, and just being able to hold space for that is exactly what they need, I want to ask you a question. Why is it important for us to be able to feel all these emotions? Because again, I think there's a little bit of a category of like good emotions, bad emotions, where what I've also learned in this work is like there's no good and bad. They're just emotions, and they were designed to experience them for a reason. But help us understand, why is it important to be able to feel those, and to like be able to like not just sense the emotion or know the emotion, but also like embody it.
Yes. So you're right. We often do have kind of put emotions into these different categories, and usually they get put in those categories based on our own experience with them. So if younger, again, anger wasn't something that was allowed, or crying, or, whatever it is, then we kind of then subconsciously, or the nervous system then categorizes that as, okay, that's a bad emotion. We don't do that one. And so here's the problem though. So when we start to kind of try to separate ourselves from like good emotion, bad emotion, like you said, there really is no such thing, but our nervous system starts to do that, we're essentially cutting ourselves off. So when we say, okay, I can't cry, or I can't, I can't be in anger or frustration or whatever it is, we're essentially then blocking our ability then to really feel joy, to also feel the other emotions that we want to experience. Because that's just also how we're designed. Like the system doesn't know how to like, okay, 20% for frustration, 80% for joy. Like it doesn't work like that. It just goes, the system gets a signal of, okay, we're cutting off, we're not allowed to feel, or it feels unsafe to experience anger. Okay, well then that means we're going to shut down essentially all these different emotions. It's not categorizing them out. So then even joy, you have a hard time accessing joy. So for a lot of my clients that I work with, they keep saying, I want to experience more joy. I want to experience more peace. I want to feel more calm, and like just my ability to be more present. And it's like, those are all amazing goals. And I think it's great that we have them. But actually the way to get there is to then actually start looking at the different emotions that you're also suppressing. So and again, not consciously, you're suppressing them. It's the nervous system. So we need to give the nervous system a new blueprint for anger. That anger is safe to experience, again, in small doses, or frustration or joy, grief, or, whatever it might be. And that's when we start opening ourselves up to more peace and joy, all the other emotions that we want to experience more of. So it's actually, we want more peace. One of the ways we get to it is actually by accessing our grief.
Oh, it's so good, Laura. So good. Like one thing conversation I have a lot with people is like it's like if you think of yourself as a container, like
Yeah.
you do have a lid, and it's like if that container's full of, again, like repressed anger, sadness, just like always biting your tongue, never expressing your truth, the just to, especially like in the corporate world, just to get the job done. If that container is filled with all of that, like you don't have room for joy, you don't have room for connection, you don't have room for presence. So just as you're saying, we got to empty some of that stuff out, right? And you can't, you have to face it, you have to address it, you have to feel it in order to release it, in order to create space for more of those things, right? But again, I think people, like as you said, don't even realize they're holding in a lot of those things because it's just become a survival strategy just to steer away from it or to not feel it. Because again, we learned as we were young that being angry is not safe for us, or crying is not allowed. And so now it's become, well, this is my survival strategy. So we don't even realize we've been holding ourselves back from experiencing it.
Absolutely. In fact, yeah, in fact, a lot of the individuals I work with, overworking is one of the ways that they suppress and numb those emotions. So as long as I'm working and I'm doing, I don't basically don't have to feel. And again, this isn't conscious. It's a survival, you said, aspect of the system that is doing this. And then, but over time, like you said, it leaves us very depleted. It leaves us like feeling farther and farther away from the things that we actually want to experience. This is why I work with very successful individuals, and yet they're actually not present in any of that success. Like they're not able to really enjoy it, um, or very, very small moments, but they don't last. And that's because, again, there's this piece, like you were just speaking to, right? Of the things being, there's no space for it in the cup, so to speak. Like it's just so full, right? And so we have to make room. The other thing I want to share too, because you said something really brilliant there too. We talk about feeling our emotions. I know we see that in self-development, we see that in therapy. One really great thing about nervous system work is you don't even have to know what the specific emotion is. We don't have to even go in and find the moment or that's not how it works. Actually, that's why I love about this work. We help can create the conditions for the system to eventually um, have the capacity or the right amount of safety to be able to experience it naturally. So sometimes people go into like self-development work going, okay, I know I'm carrying some grief from whatever this experience. I want to go and feel all that grief so I can, again, check it off and be done with the grief, or just feel it all and be done. And it's not really how the nervous system works. In fact, the more we try to put pressure on the system to feel a certain thing, to release a certain thing, actually, the more it freezes up.
Mm.
So we actually want, like, means it's going to be more like, we're going to say mostly in our head. So when we're in a freeze response, we aren't going to be able to really feel it in our body. It's going to be more like a cognitive understanding, but it's not going to be felt. This is why a lot of people kind of get stuck, so to speak, for lack of a better term, but just like they're thinking and they know all the reasons why their attachment stuff, they know they're carrying grief, but like they haven't, their system there hasn't created the right conditions yet for their system to actually process that grief in a titrated, safe way.
So, okay, so again, so many questions. So how does one go about that? Like, because again, one, I have, I would say probably 70% of the people who come to work with me are already working with a therapist. And this is no
Mhm.
knock on therapy. Talking
Yeah.
about it helps, but one thing I've heard a couple times is, they can understand, let's say it's a grief thing. Let's say it's a parent passing, and they know there's grief stuck there from it, but they also don't necessarily want to keep going back and reliving the memory of the parent passing because it's almost like re-traumatizing the system every time, right? And as you said, like we don't have to do that to allow the grief to pass, to work through the grief. So what are ways that people can do that, or even what's a step in the direction someone can start to learn about to allow themselves to to do as you say?
Yeah. So the first step I usually take clients through is creating just first a blueprint for safety. So before we can get into any kind of like big emotional, let's say wounds or things we're processing that maybe have been suppressed for a period of time, the system has to know what safety is on a felt sense. So we start with basic things like, taking, 1 to 2 minutes every day and, orienting to your environment and just noticing colors, shapes, textures, savoring, your lunch, maybe taking 60 seconds to really notice like the taste and the smell and the textures of the food that you're eating. So again, it doesn't have to take long. Could be 60 seconds, could be 2 minutes, but pausing intentionally to really notice sights, sounds, smells. That is helping to create a little bit of a foundation of safety for the system in the present moment. And then over time, we keep building on that through other just different experiences, like really savoring, like when you had a really great day with your spouse, really taking a moment to really reflect on how it felt emotionally to be connected to them, to go on that walk, to have to go out to dinner, to play with your kids, even if it was only for a minute. But like, what did that feel like? What did that smell like? What did that taste like? All those sensory aspects. And then what happens is when the system starts to feel like, okay, there's more safety here, the feelings and the emotions start to rise, and we don't even have to know where they're coming from. I know sometimes it can be confusing to the brain because the brain wants to know the story, try to feel like, well, why all of a sudden, like you could be in the kitchen chopping vegetables, all of a sudden you start crying. And you're like, what? I wasn't thinking about anything sad. Like I had a good day. What is going on here? That's because the system now feels like it has enough safety to actually feel the grief. So I have a lot of clients that experience the grief actually when they're going through seasons where they feel a lot of peace, where there's actually more joy and just like more connection and more presence. And so, yeah, and we don't even have to connect it to a specific event or memory. And sometimes that comes up, like sometimes there's an actual connection to a memory or a sensory aspect, but a lot of times it's just the emotion and just giving it space to be there, to be seen, to be heard, to be attuned with, and not having to, you said, suppress it or tell it like, okay, I can't deal with you right now. And just, giving it room to just be there and not make it wrong or bad. That is how we, from a nervous system friendly way of processing emotion.
One of the biggest struggles for high achievers is they can't tell whether they're burnt out or just overly tired. That's why I created the High Performer Stress Assessment, which will assess exactly what your mind and body are struggling with and what you need to start feeling more balanced, grounded, and happy ASAP. It only takes 2 minutes to complete, and you can find the link in the show notes below. And as you're saying that, what I take from it is like when you learn how to do this within yourself, now you're able to do it for your child as well too.
Yes.
Right? So then when they are having their big moment and they are crying or they are having a moment, if you've learned to create safety within yourself and know that you're safe to experience those, then when your child's having that moment, you're less likely to have that reaction of like, oh, I need to solve this, I need to end this, I need to shut them up. Like, because you've learned that it's safe to feel the grief, it's safe to cry, it's safe to feel the anger. And now your child can, as you said, mirror that or borrow your nervous system in that moment where they need the safety to experience what they're experiencing.
Yeah, so well said. That's exactly it. Like when our nervous system finally gets the signal or the cue that these emotions aren't a threat, that when your own child is experiencing those emotions, your system's not going to go into a survival response. It's going to say like, okay, I'm seeing them crying. You're actually going to be able to access more compassion, like you said, more presence, rather than feeling like I got to make the crying stop. Because the whole aspect of I need to make it stop is that part of you, like you said, that not having the capacity or that felt sense of safety with that emotion because it probably wasn't a blueprint for it. And same goes for your partner. If they're going through a hard time and they're experiencing some type of emotion, you're going to be able to just be more present with them and listen and attune without, like you said, having to fix it because it's not going to be so much of a threat to your system if they're frustrated or they're sad or they're a little bit quiet, right? Like that is going to feel like less of a threat and just really letting them move through it.
Okay, before we get into like the practical question that we've delayed for 15 minutes here, I have one more. Like, what do you say to the person who is, or what's your, I guess, your diagnosis or perspective of the person who, when their kid cries, they're taking the standpoint of like, well, this is life. You just have to learn from it. And the reason I bring this up is because I had a group coaching call the other night and we were talking about guilt and how like, I was like, hey, well, let's pick an example of where you felt guilty this week. And one lady had said, well, I left work a little bit early because we had a dinner planned with friends. And I felt guilty because I thought, what are people going to think of me? Like, are they going to think I did enough work to leave early? And so then I said, well, what if your kid came to you and said, like, Mom, I really want to go have dinner with my friends and like it's really important to me. Like, what would you say? And she said, she's like, well, I would ask them if they had earned it first. Like, did you do everything you need to do to be able to leave on time? And what I was hoping to access in that exercise is them being like, oh, honey, it's okay. If you want to go have fun with your friends, like, a little bit of that. But it wasn't. Her reaction was, did you earn the right to go leave and eat earlier,
Mhm.
to go do this essentially? So what's your perspective of what's happening in that moment when the parent is like almost holding their kids to the same standard that they're holding themselves to as an adult?
That's such a great example. So usually when you see a type of response like that one you just shared of that person, like that's a strong protector part. So our nervous systems, they're so brilliant. We have this really brilliant system. So when we were younger, kind of getting back to our childhood experience for just a moment, our number one goal as children was to stay connected to our caregivers because connection is vital to our nervous system. So again, if a parent is saying like certain emotions aren't allowed, or they start to disconnect from us, or give us a silent treatment, or send us to our room, our system learns that okay, I can't express this thing, and so oftentimes then what starts to happen is we have these what's called protectors start to form. So for the one you were just naming just now, that sounds like a very harsh kind of inner critic part that comes up and says like, okay, well, no, we can't do that until this has been accomplished, or a high achiever part, or whatever it might be, right? And usually those parts form as a way to stay connected to our primary caregivers. So, and maybe even something that they said to us too, growing up. Maybe there was a parent that had a harsh inner critic themselves. That's what they were saying. And so then we learned that, okay, that the way to stay connected is to basically speak that same language, to have that same, or just model that behavior they want me to follow in order to stay connected to them. And when I say connected, meaning like they're still speaking to us and, maybe making eye contact, or I want dad to play with me later. So I want to make sure like he's in a good mood. So like, I'm just going to make sure like if he tells me I need to finish this thing before I can do this other thing, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Right. And so like that's really what we're looking at then is a protector part. And protectors are protecting a very tender, younger version of us. There's that little part of us that is feeling a lot of big emotion, like you said, shame or guilt, or who's needing a lot of comfort. But that protector is there as a way to like essentially protect us from having to feel those same emotions again, to feel vulnerable. And what I was really sensing, what the story you were sharing is like, vulnerability is not safe. I was modeled that any type of vulnerability is not safe and not welcome. So there's different ways that our system then adapts to make sure that we don't show any type of vulnerability.
Yeah, and like you said, it's so subconscious. We don't
Yeah.
realize like that we're doing it, or then also what we're now passing on to our kids in the process, right? So, okay, so now this brings me to the question we've been putting off. So, so now let's say this, Laura. I'm a high achieving leader. I've listened to this. I've heard everything you guys said. I identify with the fact that I probably had that growing up. Like,
Mhm.
again, my parents weren't around. They were working so much. It wasn't safe for me to have big emotions. Like, and even I'm just speaking about myself personally. It was not. Like, I remember one time coming outside to cry to my mom in the yard about something, and there was a neighbor there, and my mom goes, "Shh, back in the house." Like, that was her first response. And not because my mom's a bad mom. My mom is so sweet and adorable and loving, would do anything for me. But that was her first reaction. Go back in the house. We'll talk about this in there. Like, not a hug, not a what happened, go back in the house, right? So I know this about me now. I can see myself in what you've expressed or what you've shared today. It wasn't safe for me to have big emotions. Now I have kids, right? And I want to make sure I'm not passing on the same things, but I also know myself when I get home from work right now, I am
Mhm.
overwhelmed. I'm not connecting. I'm not present. I am snapping. I am just scrolling on my phone. Like, what do I do? Where do I start? How can I start to be more present so that I can make sure this doesn't carry on in my child?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you are asking that question, you already are you're already winning, by the way, just by asking that question. Just by listening to this podcast, I also want to celebrate you because you're already breaking an intergenerational pattern just by asking the question, because you're already recognizing this. You want to shift something. You don't want this to continue on in your lineage. Um, and so one of the first things I speak to with clients around this piece is like, the next time, let's say your child has a big emotion, don't start by watching your child. I want you to start by noticing yourself. And what I mean by that is first asking yourself, what is happening inside me right now? So again, just getting curious, do your shoulders feel tense? Does your jaw tighten? Is your breath shallow? Do you suddenly feel very rushed? Do you have this need to stop it immediately? I know we talked about that earlier. Do you feel angry? Do you feel helpless? Do you want to shut down? And so these are signs that you're failing. These are clues. And so your body is telling something about your nervous system in that moment. So when we become curious instead of critical, this is when everything begins to change. So first just getting curious, like, where am I right now? What am I noticing? And you can also do this, like, if it's really overwhelming in the moment, let's say your child is screaming or really angry. Obviously you want to make sure that there's nothing around them that could hurt them. So you want to get objects and things away from them if need be. But you can even get a little bit of space. Like if you need to take a little bit of space from the child for a moment, just so your system can have some of that distance, and then taking a second to orient to the space, to stop looking at only the child and the trigger, and looking around the room and just seeing, what is it you can see right now? What colors, what shapes, what textures, right? Another thing that's really helpful is feeling your feet on the ground, looking down at your feet, noticing your feet, pressing them into the floor. Again, the goal isn't to go from 100 to 0. We're not trying to be completely calm here. We're just trying to bring a little bit more presence into your own experience of what's going on right now, as well as, can I help to bring down some of the sense of maybe urgency that I'm experiencing in this moment by signaling to my system a little bit of safety through feeling my feet on the floor, through looking around the room. That's one thing to do. The other thing I would say also is, before talking, you have to also understand that most young kids, when they become overwhelmed, their thinking brain becomes less available. So reasoning, problem solving, listening, impulse control, language, these parts temporarily become harder to access for the child. So if we're continually trying to talk to the child when they're clearly overwhelmed and dysregulated in that moment, it's actually going to lead to more stress for them and then stress for us, because then we're noticing that nothing's happening. They're not responding to our words. And so oftentimes I tell parents to actually be quiet, say less.
If you're a high achiever, you probably feel the exhaustion that comes with always pushing and carrying the load. And here's the honest truth. Burnout doesn't fix itself by working harder or pushing more. You're not meant to just survive your success. You're someone who leads with impact and depth and intention, and you deserve to feel calm and connected while doing it. So imagine showing up present for your work and your personal relationships, feeling calm and grounded instead of constantly stretched. If that's what you want, this is exactly what we do in the Higher Alignment program. Book your assessment call through the link in the show notes, and let's get you back to balance and back to feeling like yourself again.
So feel your feet on the floor, take a breath, notice the things around you, and be quiet. Let silence be there for even just a few seconds before giving the next direction or another thing that you need to say. So, use less words. And see if you can soften your shoulders a little bit, maybe even soften your face, because the child's also most likely looking at your facial expressions in that moment too. So seeing if you can just soften your jaw a little bit, maybe if you notice you're tensing in the jaw, see if you can just soften it by 1%. And again, sometimes it feels like forever we're in those moments too. I also want to remind you that most children, when they're going through a big emotional experience, it can feel like, oh my gosh, this is lasting for hours, when really sometimes maybe it's 10 minutes, right? But to our system, when it's really activated, it can feel like a really long time. But also just notice that. I want you to see, just to notice again, what's around you, feeling your feet on the floor, and then just being patient with the process. And it takes time. And if you still notice yourself getting overwhelmed, just again, coming back to yourself and saying, this makes sense. Even validating your own experience of okay, I'm feeling frustrated right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And you know what? That's my nervous system. I'm feeling very stressed in this moment, but it makes sense. I make sense. Like you said, my child's response right now is making sense. He or she is clearly overwhelmed. Um, and so another thing that can be helpful too in these moments is like picturing, imagining your child standing on one side of a river and you're on the other side and they're overwhelmed, they're flooded, they're scared, they're disappointed. You can't yell instructions across the river. You can't reason them across the river. You have to walk toward them. You have to meet them where they are. So that's where you offer your hand, help them cross back into connection with you. That's that co-regulation. That's not fixing your child's emotions. It's becoming steady so they can borrow your steadiness, right? So even again, if you're feeling really flooded, even just coming down by 1 or 2%, when I say coming down, meaning like if you're really feeling a lot of urgency and overwhelm in that moment or a lot of frustration, like again, even just 1% of feeling your feet on the floor, noticing your surroundings, taking a breath, checking in with you and what's going on with you is going to start to help their system to shift as well. And it's going to take a little time. Again, I'm not going to say it's going to happen in the first 30 seconds or the first 60 seconds. It might take a few minutes, but also I really encourage you to use less words. Let silence be there. And for some of you, I know silence can be uncomfortable. So we kind of build up to that, but less is more. Less talking, taking breaths. Their nervous systems are picking up on all those cues. And watch how it starts to shift. Watch how they start to take a breath too. Watch how they start to come towards you. Maybe they want a hug. And then that's when you reach out and give them a hug, right? And then the child's nervous system starts to calm and to settle more.
It's so brilliant, Laura, what you just laid out. And I think it's very practical steps that people can start to implement, right? But also I want to share, like, it's going to be uncomfortable, guys. Like the
Yes.
first handful, first 20 times you do this, you're going to be like, oh my God, Laura told me just to not talk, but I want to talk. And it's like, you're going to feel so uncomfortable. But I want to say that it is almost like embrace the discomfort and just know it's going to just be that way until the nervous system starts to adapt. So don't try and run from the discomfort. Almost use it as a sign that you're doing something different than you normally would, right? Like use it as like, okay, I feel really uncomfortable not talking. How long? Again, it's going to feel like hours that you're doing it for, even though it's probably just seconds or minutes, but just the longer you can, not the longer, but if you can ride that wave of discomfort, you'll find your way to the other side, right? But don't try and steer away from it. Try and sit with it. And then the more you do that, the easier it will become to do it more and more. And then that's when you're going to really start having the breakthroughs that Laura is talking about.
Yeah. So well said. And you said it's going to be uncomfortable. We're not going to lie. It absolutely is. But like you said, discomfort is actually a good sign that we're heading in the right direction. Obviously, we don't want to be if we're so flooded in that moment, that might be helpful to actually step away. If there's not a parent that can step in that moment, definitely, utilize that. But yeah, just again, like it's tiny steps. This is 1-2% incremental steps that build up over time. You're compounding the interest. You think about when you're putting money in a bank account, you're thinking long term, like, if I put a certain amount of money in with the interest that's going to compound over the next 10 years, it's going to lead to this, right? So it's the same thing with our nervous system. So every time you take a breath, every time you say less, that you're compounding interest there in that moment for yourself and for your child's nervous system. And one other book I'd like to recommend for those of you that are obviously leaders, this can apply also, of course, like, the topic we're talking about today with children, but there's a book called Think Like a Horse, and it's one of my favorite books. It's about a rancher, actually, who opened up a retreat for high executive leaders and CEOs. I think some of them were from Microsoft. It's one of the stories. Like, and he brings these leaders to his ranch, and they work with horses. And it's so fascinating because horses have very sensitive nervous systems, similar to children. So they can sense in milliseconds where your nervous system is. And so this rancher essentially was taking these different leaders to these different exercises. He doesn't call them nervous system exercises, but they essentially are, where they approach the horse. They have to give certain directions. They have to have boundaries. And it's really interesting how the horse will then respond to the person. There's usually less words. Again, you don't talk to the horse. It's all through your energy. It's all through your body language and your nervous system, that what they're picking up on as to whether they follow that direction or they don't. And it's a very powerful book. If you are a leader, if you are a parent, because it still applies. He just talks specifically about children in the book. But yeah, it's called Think Like a Horse.
I'm going to have to get that for myself. It sounds fascinating. Now I want to go. We have horses that just moved in. Then we have like a ranch just 2 blocks from our house and they have horses and I stop by and see them when I can. But now I'm going to like try and be the horse whisperer, see where my energy's at. Like, oh, the horse ran away. Okay, not doing so good today. So
Yeah.
Well, this was so helpful, Laura. Thank you so much. I think there was a lot of insight here, but again, a lot of practical steps that people can start to take. So thank you so much. And just before we go, please share where people can find you, anything that you have going on that you want people to know about. Please share that.
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, lauralisalarios.com. I do, of course, have, one-to-one. I work with clients one-to-ones. If you're interested in that, reach out. I also, I'm doing more of these like, in-person, also virtual workshops. So if you have a team or, or you as a leader just want me, come into your organization to speak about the nervous system and different tools that can be impactful for your organization. Particularly right now, so I'm working with a lot of, not only in the education space, but I live here in San Francisco. So with the tech industry and like the rise of tech right now, there's also been this whole other avenue where I've been talking to leaders about, okay, we have all this AI and rise and all this amazing technology, but like at the same time, we also need those who are implementing what the AI is, the information, the data that it's giving our leaders. Their nurses has to be in a regulated state to actually utilize it. So if you're interested in that conversation or learning more about how we can, merge this aspect of this work with, technology and innovation and having it work for us versus against us, I would love to talk with you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Laura, again for being here. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.